So, folks, I'm going to show you a video in a sec, but I don't want to bury the lead. So this is about masks and children, and they had a accidental long-term study. So this is printed in the British Medical Journal. It says use of face masks did not impact COVID-19 incidence among 10 to 12-year-olds in Finland. So that's I don't want to bury the lead. That's the lead. They did a huge study in Finland. They compared two cities. One city masked their kids, one city didn't. And here is the result. So which city do you think masked their kids and which didn't? This city didn't mask their kids, had a lower incidence of COVID for those kids, and this city did.
One's Helsinki.
Helsinki is the red. They masked their kids. They didn't. And then there's Turku. They did. So I'm gonna have so I just wanted to get that out. So now I have a guy who can explain it much better. This guy's he's an actual doctor. He's an actual doctor. No, I disagree with some of the stuff this guy says. He can be a shit just like everybody else, and he said some bullshit, but he gets this right. And so I got a video of it, so I'm gonna play it. Here he is getting it right.
The American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC went far beyond the World Health Organization and UNICEF, and they boldly declared that mask mandates work even from 2 and above. And so from 2 through...
So did you hear? I'm going to play that again because that's kind of stunning. In the United States, we're much more radical when it comes to treating COVID. As far as the authoritarian lockdown things, masks. Listen to what he says, how different it is in the United States than even what the WHO recommends.
The American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC went far beyond the World Health Organization and UNICEF, and they boldly declared that mask mandates work even from 2 and above. And so from 2 through 5, they just...
Without any studies, they said that it worked. From a 2 and above.
Decided to implement a mask mandate. Of course, the World Health Organization, the WHO, said, you better not do that. That's probably not going to work. It's probably not going to make much sense. And they did not recommend it under the age of 6 and only selectively from 6 to 12. Well... we failed to generate any high-quality evidence to kind of answer who was right. The best study we had was a study from Spain, and it took advantage...
So the CDC in the United States are saying masks from kids 2 and above. The WHO is saying no masks on kids 6 and under, and only 6 to 12. You should... not in every situation. And so he's going to talk about, we have a study. The only other study we had is from Spain, and here it is.
A study design called regression discontinuity, and I've talked about it before on this channel, but basically they note that in Spain, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds, they don't have to mask because they follow the World Health Organization guidelines, and 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and 8-year-olds do. And they found a relationship between age and the rate of spread of SARS-CoV-2, which is the older you are, the more it spreads. And if masking worked, then a 5-year-old who has 11 months under the belt and a 6-year-old with 1 month, there should be a steep regression discontinuity, a steep drop in transmission when you go from 5 to 6, showing you the mask effect. But what they found in that study in Spain was... talked about it before, I've showed the picture on this channel, no effect at all. It looked like a continual line suggesting that masking kids, especially those ages, has negligible or probably no effect.
So I'll explain it one more time. So kids under 6 years old are not wearing masks in this study. So he's saying, so when they go from 5 years old to 6, you should see a dramatic downturn or reduction in the amount of COVID that they get because now they're going to be wearing masks. And he's saying that's not what we found. Straight line. There's the straight line. It did not drop. You would think here's in between 5 and 6-year-olds. You think it would go down. It doesn't. It goes straight up. So the conclusion was that it doesn't have any effect, masking kids. It doesn't prevent COVID. That's what that study says. That's what he's saying. And that was the only other study we had. And now we got another one.
Of course, that's because many behavioral interventions done en masse at very young ages, have poor compliance, and don't actually work. That's probably a universal truth of medicine. I don't know why anyone forgot that truth, but they did. Well, the open question was whether or not it works at older ages, and Finland has come to the rescue with a new preprint, and they take advantage of a unique factor in Finland, which was that some cities, like Helsinki, they really follow the WHO guidelines, and they didn't mask kids 10 to 12. They said 12 and above, we're going to do it. But 10 to 12, WHO says to do it selectively, on a selective basis, and they felt that that wasn't sufficient enough to have it as a mandate. But other cities in Finland, Turku, decided to do it. Helsinki didn't do it. Turku did do it. And so these are cities with hundreds of thousands of people in it. These are cities at a comparable base rates of SARS-CoV-2 spread. This is a natural experiment. What happened in Turku when they went ahead and masked 10 to 12? They decided to go a little bit beyond the WHO. And so you have a perfect comparison, I think. The same country, the same practices, the same sort of baseline rates, two cities of several 100,000 people in both cities. You know, it's not a perfect randomized control trial, which is what I think we ought to have done, but it's probably the closest we're ever going to get in this pandemic. And what do they find? Lo and behold, I'm going to show you the figure right here on the screen. You might think those two lines look like there's a difference, but it turns out the one that's a little bit higher is Turkey, the place that they're masking. Here is 10 to 12-year-olds. These are 10 to 12-year-olds and the rate of SARS-CoV-2 spread. One city's not masking, one city is masking, and overall, there's no real difference between the two cities. If anything, the city that's doing it is doing a little bit worse. What does this mean? I think this is a huge indictment of our policies over the last 2 years. We have implemented this without generating robust evidence. This is incredibly divisive. Obviously, people feel strongly about this issue. The United States is particularly reckless. They went all the way down to 2, 3, 4. Well, the European Union is not so reckless, and even they exercise restraint, but they still did it in some cities, 10, 11, 12, while other cities did not. And what we find from the Spanish data is it doesn't look like 6 is a magic number. It doesn't look like that actually does anything if you start to mask 6-year-olds versus not mask 5-year-olds. It looks like 10, 11, 12 is not a magic number too from this Finnish data. What does this mean? This means is, we have no idea about kids. It's very likely that this intervention is the most marginal to no effect size intervention that's ever been deployed from public health on this scale for this much time. It clearly has a downside. The downside is, of course, people don't want to do it. If it didn't have a downside, people wouldn't take it off when you tell them you can take it off because they would say, well, it has no downside at all. Of course, it does have a downside, and many people experience that downside. They're happy to take it off when the mandates drop. This is an indictment of our failed policy. Of course, the first level of failure is whether or not you get the policy right. In this Finnish data, I think a nice natural experiment shows you probably got it wrong. But the next level is the arrogance and the hubris to go out there and say, not only do we recommend this policy, but this is absolutely #follow the science, #backed by science, which it clearly isn't. Because if it were, you would have had a clear signal in this study. I think you would have had a clear signal. And it's not, because you didn't run any gold standard studies. And so you're out there pushing this mandate, and you're not running cluster randomized control trials. And you're doing something that's not time limited. I would be happy with it if you do it for 3 months and then you say, okay, you know what? We did it in the heat of the moment. We never generated data. We got to take it away. But you're doing it for year after year after year. And to some degree, it does kind of clash with people's common sense intuition that a 2-year-old wearing a mask and touching it and fidgeting it is probably not going to do that much. And yet the mayor of New York City continues to offer the only toddler mandate. That's what I call it, because they've removed the mandates for masking for all other ages except the 2 to 4.
Isn't that crazy?
Which is really bizarre. It's as if they think that that's the problematic group.
That's crazy.
I don't think that that's the problematic group, but I think they really need to understand
2 to 4-year-olds.
Risk by age. They need to go back to the drawing board and learn some epidemiology 101, because that would teach them that it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Finnish study, excellent study. I think it might be the closest to what we get to an answer, which is sort of natural experiments that took place in Europe. We have the Spanish study, we have this study. Now, why are American studies not as good? Well, in America, unlike in Finland, there are huge differences between places that deploy the masks and don't deploy the masks, or mandated and don't. We can talk about the Pima Maricopa County study. Are we to really take seriously that places that vote for different political parties, that have strong differences in vaccination rates, that have different beliefs about SARS-CoV-2, but one happened to mask, one didn't mask, that the only variable we're isolating is the masking, whereas Finland has a culture that has a lot of sort of consistency. It's a much smaller place. These cities are comparable in size, and Finland is doing only this policy difference. I think it's much more likely that those are comparable. And in fact, the base rate was comparable entering. They didn't have to go hunting and fishing for a comparable county. They had something available right away. So those are my thoughts. Great study. Might be the best that we get this pandemic. It's an indictment of U.S. policy. I think as time goes on, the U.S. policy is going to crumble. It's going to look really, really bad, and the people who are critical of it would be vindicated. And the people who, of course, were responsible are the people who controlled the federal purse, who could have funded and run a cluster randomized trial, but repeatedly did not, and repeatedly instead put forth flawed observational studies. So those are my thoughts.
So they never did the studies they were supposed to, just like they never did the studies on ivermectin they were supposed to. We still, the biggest study that's going on, we're not going to find out till the fall what it reveals about ivermectin. So you have all these other little studies coming out. Every time there's a little study that comes out that shows that ivermectin doesn't work, boy, they blast it on the front page of everything. But when there's studies that show contrary results, you never hear of them, except here at this show or Dr. John Campbell's YouTube show. So that's why you watch. And even a guy like this, this guy, I think his name is Dr. Vinay Prasad. I forgot. I had it written down.
Yeah, Prasad. That right.
Yeah, that's it. And he certainly hasn't been on the forefront of knocking down the COVID narrative like other doctors have, but he's useful for us on this video. So there you go.
I think it's good that Fauci said both masks do and don't work. So that way he was right about one of his
Yes.
one of his answers is definitely right.
Fauci said, "Bah, I wish I had that video in there now. I would like to play it." That video of him saying both things back and forth about masks. We're doing live stand-up shows in Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Des Moines, Omaha, Kansas City, Las Vegas, all over the country. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for tickets. And single tickets now available at all venues. So if you tried to buy one before and you couldn't, single tickets are now available. Plus, while you're at jimmydorcomedy.com, why don't you become a premium member? Sign up to our mailing list so when they cancel us, we can still stay in touch.